In 2024, I saw over 100 new releases, and if you're asking yourself, why the f would he try to rank all those films? Well, I kinda am too. It's a daunting and honestly kind of arbitrary task, but if there's one thing I know YouTube loves, it's lists. So that's why after sharing my top 10 least favorite films of 2024, I'm ringing in the new year with double positivity by ranking my top 20 favorite films of 2024. Most of them are 2024. There are some that are technically 2023 releases, but didn't see a wide release in America until this year, so I'm gonna go ahead and count those. But first, some honorable mentions, films I think you should definitely check out that are good, but we're just shy of making this list. There's Sometimes I Think About Dying, a slow but heartfelt look at the pains of self-isolation and monotony that still manages to be hopeful while containing Daisy Ridley's best performance to date. I Used to Be Funny is a depressing tale of finding yourself again after trauma that shows Rachel Sennett is just as good in a dramatic role as she is in a comedic one. We Live in Time made my wife cry through the entire thing, and I honestly get it, because the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh is just that damn good. Problemisto was one of the wackiest and creative films of the year, cementing director and star Julio Torres as one to look out for. And The Bike Riders was just a good old-fashioned historical drama, highlighting the magnetic pull of belonging to something bigger than yourself. And that doesn't even cover the well-crafted Heretic, the hilarious Drive-Away Dolls, the tense A Quiet Place Day One, the mind-boggling Mads, and the profanity-riddled Wicked Little Letters. All great films I definitely recommend you check out. But let's get into the top 20. At number 20, we have Strange Darling, one of the most intricately crafted thrillers of the year. While it appears by the numbers on the surface, it quickly pulls the rug out from under you to deliver a fairly surprising film with an absolutely gorgeous aesthetic of popping saturation and tasty film grain. The film's fractured narrative generates an engaging mystery, playing on tropes and boundaries in a way that just might spin you for a loop. The two leads are incredible, the directing is smart and intentional, and it even has a little layer of dark comedy underneath it all. All the while, it gives some potentially prickly commentary on consent, power dynamics, and manipulation. It's not always what it appears to be, and I love it for it. Number 19 is Monkey Man, and I don't care if this was just an excuse for Dev Patel to show off his abs and fighting moves, he's more than earned it. The director and star weaves a story of revenge that is elevated by the injection of poignant Indian culture, a tantalizing soundtrack, and some highly entertaining fight scenes. Patel shows true competence and talent as a director here, rarely ever settling for mediocre shot compositions or transitions. These action sequences are gritty, bare-knuckle, and appropriately sloppy at times. The film touches upon the political climate in India as well, while also taking time to showcase marginalized communities like the Hijra, transgender warriors devoted to the belief in the third gender. It takes a not-so-unique story and warps it into Patel's own vision, and I think he nails it. In short, it goes apeshit. Number 18 is Stress Positions, a rather uncomfortable film about a bunch of a-holes trying to make it through the pandemic without killing each other. Huge emphasis on the stress in the title because the film's claustrophobic and sweaty nature really manages to make things uncomfortable, but in a pretty funny way. It feels like a release of all the frustrations we experience while cooped up inside, being unable to live the lives we want. What makes the film so great is how those frustrations tie into other non-outbreak related worries like gender, religion, and identity, which pushes it beyond the boundaries of the specific moment in time and makes it a bit more evergreen. I know we want to forget those times, but this is one of those pieces of art that makes them somewhat worth revisiting. Number 17 is How to Have Sex, and no, you should not take dating advice from this movie. In reality, it's an honest portrayal of girlhood, both the good and the bad. The film portrays its characters with frustrating authenticity, but also makes room for genuine sympathy. It's a summer break filled with bad decisions that aren't just rooted in desires to be young and dumb, but to avoid the unfortunate reality that awaits you once you leave your fever dream. Those wants of being seen, desired, and understood lead to traumatic circumstances that feel easy to brush off as simple irresponsibility, but the film knows there's much more to it than that. This manages to be quite the roller coaster, starting off fun and relatable before taking a dive into the realms of depressing and relatable. The bad kind this time. Yet there's so much grace and understanding on display here for those confusing times in our lives, and while I am not represented in the central focal point of the film, it managed to resonate with me regardless. And just when you think DreamWorks has hit its stylistic peak with the most recent Puss in Boots film, they come right back with the absolutely stellar and gorgeous film, Number 16's The Wild Robot. It's incredibly touching and cutesy, but holds a respectable amount of maturity to how it handles death and living up to the impossible standards placed on us by societal structures, specifically with motherhood. Yet I don't think it ever drifts too far off course of being a kids' film, containing enough silly talking critters that deliver halfway decent comedy and morals. I'm sure parents and children alike will tear up with this one, which I fully support. I think we all need to cry a bit more, don't you? Number 15 is, and this may be a bit hyperbolic, one of the most important action films I've seen, and that's Netflix's Rebel Ridge. Sure, the setup of lone man versus crooked cops isn't exactly original, but how it goes about the narrative framework is truly remarkable. This is an action film that manages to deliver on thrilling, well-constructed fight sequences without taking a single life. This is more than just a gimmick, however, as it digs to the roots of the antagonist identity, which isn't exactly foreign to the current state of affairs the world is in today. A station of high and mighty, trigger-happy cops is built upon a foundation of by any means necessary, evident by how they decide to get our main character's attention in the opening scene by hitting him with their car. Yet our ex-Marine protagonist, played intelligently by Aaron Pierre, illustrates the non-lethal alternatives to getting things done, as he goes through every violent encounter with the intention to subdue in the most non-aggressive way he possibly can. It's such a smart way to build a film as a parallel to real life, and it never stops being entertaining, frustrating, and eye-opening. Number 14 is Oddity, which is a bit of a supernatural mystery that takes its time to get going, yet never feels like it's dragging its feet. Set in Ireland, the film follows a blind clairvoyant trying to get to the bottom of her sister's murder through otherworldly means. The tension is palpable throughout, but the real star of the film is the tight script, which gradually lets information slip out little by little. It's one of the smartest scripts I've seen from the genre in a while, with each development in the plot leaving me more and more enthralled. But this guessing game is also home to a slowly building uncertainty, one that keeps you guessing as to what kind of monster we're dealing with here. Man or something else. Plus, the sound design's minimalistic approach is so effective, paired with some haunting imagery that really gives it a punch. It goes by quickly, but still has latched itself onto me. It takes the familiar haunted house formula, condenses it, and does something wholly unique with it in a way I absolutely loved. While not the most visceral horror film out there, this is great if you enjoy a good mystery and dread that lingers with you throughout. Number 13 is one of those 2023 releases that became available to view in 2024, and it's too good to pass up. I'm of course talking about The Last Stop in Yuma County. I'm a simple man. I see Jim Cummings in a movie, I watch it. And while he's not in the director's chair like I'm used to, this still has all the elements of his films that I love. This is a claustrophobic, hilarious crime film that may seem by the numbers at first, but the last half of the film spirals out of control into one bad decision after another. There's so many moving pieces in the form of new characters that start to trickle into the narrative, but everything flows so well and remains tight throughout. And like I said, Jim Cummings is the star of the show, using his usual brand of pathetic and neurotic sensibilities to really take this thing off the rails into darkly funny territory. It's a very quick watch that manages to fly by, remaining engaging and entertaining all the way to its explosive end. Number 12 is I Saw the TV Glow, probably the most unique film I saw all year. On the surface, this is a coming-of-age drama that can elicit several relatable memories of suburbia, hyperfixations, and the heavy expectations that come with conforming into societal norms. Yet there is so much more working underneath the surface, and that's where the horror comes from. It's obviously allegorical for the trans experience, but I don't think that topic has ever been utilized to instill so much dread and nausea into a story before, at least from what I've seen. Amidst the gorgeous use of color and the unique soundtrack is a fear that you've suppressed that true you and will never come to terms with that as you continue to conform to the standards that surround you. There are moments in this film that twisted my stomach in a way I hadn't felt all year, even though the central idea doesn't directly apply to me. But through all the darkness and dread is a shining light of hope, a reminder that it's never over and there is still time to find yourself, no matter how old you are. Some will be turned off by the abstract and ethereal way it presents these ideas, but this is still one of the most bold films of the year and has kept me thinking about it a ton since I first saw it. And that certainly means something. Number 11 is also a very unique film, unlike anything I've seen before, and that's hundreds of beavers. Essentially a Looney Tunes episode brought to life, the purposefully cheaply made aesthetic is utilized in hilarious and ingenious ways, crafting a slapstick throwback that hits you with rapid-fire sight gags and physical comedy at an impressive rate. The upfront goofiness lets you know exactly what you're getting yourself into from the beginning, yet the film still finds ways to surprise you by continuing to bounce off the wall with cartoonish, kinetic energy. It seriously never lets up and manages to get more creative, more ingenious, and way more silly as the story goes on. It's rare for me to see low-budget films utilize this effectively, but this movie is absolutely a work of art. This feels like it was born to be a cult classic, but don't just wait for the next midnight screening of it. See it as soon as you can. Alright, now let's get into the heavy hitters of the year, starting with number 10. Snack Shack is one of the best pieces of summer nostalgia I've seen in a long time. This is such a fun, fast-paced, nostalgic comedy anchored by the chemistry between lead stars Connor Sherry and the ever-on-the-rise Gabriel LaBelle. Their volatile but heartfelt relationship reminded me a lot of Ed, Edd n Eddy, a couple of go-getters constantly finding ways to maximize their profits through various schemes. From horse races to basement brewed beer, the duo share an ingenuity and determination that is a blast to see played out. The effectiveness of their dynamic is also amplified by a great whip-crack script that manages to balance both comedy and melodrama very well. On top of that, the film is just a loving ode to the simpler days of childhood, filled with swimming, hot dogs, and love triangles. You didn't have to be illegally making hundreds of dollars when you were 15 to relate to this either. There's just something about that season where you had the most freedom out of the entire year and how huge that managed to feel. It's a cozy watch that still manages to pack an emotional punch, even if those swings can feel a bit cliche and overdramatic at times. Even still, this was a knock out of the ballpark for me and really makes me want to check out the director's other film, Dinner in America. And that's the only film, probably. And now, winning the award for the most mistreated film of the year is Furiosa, from the actually genius and twisted mind of George Miller. Following up Mad Max Fury Road is a near impossible task, and I think George Miller knew this. So the final product seems to have disappointed some expecting another Fury Road, which I'm okay with not getting because we already have Fury Road. The film's focus on character over concept crafts a vastly different odyssey that still maintains the carnage and insanity that we loved about the prior film. Anya Taylor-Joy and Elila Brown do a solid job at portraying the tragic Furiosa through multiple stages of her life, each bringing something unique to the role while building upon the character's journey. Then there's Chris Hemsworth delivering a kooky, unhinged performance as Dementis that steals the show whenever he's on screen. Potentially my favorite performance of the year. While there's a much more prevalent reliance on CGI effects this time around, I think this gives the visual style of the film a warped punk vibe that accurately reflects the insanity of the wasteland. The action is still gloriously over the top with no shortage of impressive stunts and set pieces to gawk at, like the tanker ambush. Despite the use of digital effects, it still manages to be a practical marvel like its predecessor. It's a tad messy, but I think it's still one of the most fun and creative films of the year that absolutely deserves a second chance.
There are consequences to your crimes against Dracula.
This one was a buzzer beater, sneaking in just before the end of the year. I'm of course talking about Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, a passion project of his that is finally seeing the light of day. Yet, unlike a real vampire, it doesn't burn out under the spotlight. While it does feel a tad derivative of its predecessors, Eggers still manages to instill his own signature brand of era accuracy and looming dread. Count Orlok, played by resident chameleon Bill Skarsgård, is a force of nature, representing the dark embodiment of lust, manipulation, and desire. The psychosexual nature of vampire stories has never felt as haunting, as its utilization as a dark shroud that masks itself as love gives this thing layers beyond a simple battle of good and evil. Perhaps Orlok is not the most horrifying thing here, rather it's Lily Rose Depp's Ellen's desire for him that she cannot come to terms with herself. And what does that say about her own views of desire and passion? Like most of Eggers' work, the film is absolutely gorgeous to behold, being one of the most effective uses of heavy darkness I've seen in what feels like forever. Remember when we used to shoot night scenes that you could actually still see? The film slowly descends into fever dream territory where everything from the main characters to the city starts to slip into madness. Star-studded across the board and home to some of the darkest meditations on evil since Eggers' The Witch, this stands as a triumph for one of the director's most sought-after achievements: full frontal male nudity.
Nah, it's not going on like that, mate.
Damn, dude, what a gut punch is Memoir of a Snail, my favorite animated movie of the year. Director Adam Elliott is known for his dark stop-motion films about childhood and growing old, and his latest outing is no different, but no less effective. The unique, unconventional character and world designs are a joy to see, with so much humanity injected into them, warts and all. At times, it's comically bleak, drawing both uncomfortable laughs and tear buildups depending on the moment. Maybe both at the same time, too. There's so much relatable sadness to unpack here, as I'm trying to remember the last time an animated film cut this deep on a personal level. Yet it still gives off an incredible sense of hope. A reassurance that we're all on this dumb little rock together and our experiences aren't as unique as we may think. And it's not just quirky for quirk's sake. The metaphorical nature of the snail is applied so effectively and is sure to resonate with people across all ages and periods of life. Everything from the beautifully crafted animation to the gut-wrenching vocal performances to the absurd but grounded comedy hit so successfully. This really is something special that you owe it to yourself to check out when you can. Maybe just bring some tissues and be open to some weirdness, like the idea of seeing snail ejaculation on screen. Yes, really. Something I meant to bring up earlier is that this has been a phenomenal year for female directors. Sure, there have been tons of terrific films of the past few years directed by women, but their work has really seemed to make their way to the forefront for a chance. And Love Lies Bleeding is one of those successes. This is both a sexy and grimy crime noir that manages to capture the right amount of pulp to create a highly entertaining, aggressive good time. Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien's erotic but highly combustible relationship is full of lust, insecurities, and deceit, which makes each progression in their companionship magnetic and stressful. Both are trapped in this wasteland of a town for one reason or another, and both open each other up to the possibility of hope and happiness they once thought was out of reach. The dusty, dirty aesthetic only adds to the stress, creating a rather isolated setting that tries to dash any sense of hope the moment it sparks. It definitely gets a little out there, taking some big swings by the end that may not be everyone's cup of tea, but personally, I loved it. It's always great to see an unapologetic LGBTQ film that isn't afraid to get dirty and gross in between the hot stuff, like Ed Harris's Wig. And I'll let you decide whether or not I meant it's gross or hot. While I do think the masterful marketing behind this film created nearly impossible expectations to meet, I still really enjoyed the crime thriller Longlegs, finding it to be one of the scariest films of the year. There's certainly an air of evilness to it, almost like it exists in a void that completely sucks any light and hope out of it. It excels at building tension and letting empty space create implications for your mind to stress over. Seriously, the scariest moments of the film are things just out of view or maybe not even there at all. Each scene cut feels like a threat where you don't know what's waiting for you around the corner, while the overblown sound design keeps you on edge even when nothing traditionally scary is happening. Micah Monroe is a solid conduit for us to experience this trauma with, while Nicolas Cage brings the satanic drag madness as the titular killer. There were so many moments where my breath just left me, and the film expertly allows your mind to do the heavy lifting of crafting what nightmares await you, all while never letting you grow comfortable in places where you think you're safe. The story is fairly straightforward, but leaves enough mystery to mull over until the third act lays all the cards out on the table, which may disappoint some hoping for a bit more vagueness. But despite that, the story of evil invading our present and past is remarkably effective, making for one of the best serial killer films of the past few years.
I'm seeing double here.
But my favorite horror film of the year has gotta be this batshit film all about living your best life, aka The Substance. Gratuitous as all hell and as subtle as fireworks during a church service, this film wears its schlocky B-movie heritage proudly on its beautiful, horrendous skin. It gets incredibly gross at times as flesh gets pierced, stretched, and malformed in truly sickening ways, heightened by grade A practical effects and revolting sound design. But what makes the film so compelling is the dynamic between stars Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, two fame-hungry starlets vying over the same consciousness, often forgetting they're different sides of the same coin. While it's crude and juvenile at times, there's still a solid underlying message about aging and self-hatred that really shines through the grotesque visuals. It's incredibly goofy, yet some of its more serious scenes, like Elizabeth trying to get ready for her date, show the true horror of our own warped views of ourselves. The film's presentation is also uniquely maximalist, going big and in your face in a way I don't see a ton of horror films do anymore. With its intense close-ups and its striking color palette, it feels so fresh and unique despite a relatively familiar premise. It's definitely not for the weak-stomached, but I suggest they watch it anyway because that just sounds funny. Sean Baker's ascent amongst the indie scene has finally paid off with his most recent Palme d'Or winning film, Anora. This feels remarkably more approachable than his past films, yet he never deters from the controversial subject matter and communities he has focused on over the past several years. That down-to-earth, personable energy is still found here as he dives into the life of exotic dancers and the mega wealthy. This is a highly entertaining film that may just be the funniest film of the year, though you may not expect it at first. The first chunk of the film plays out like a scrappy, against all odds young romance that eventually spirals into a nutty, borderline slapstick comedy that boils with steaming frustrations courtesy of the film's supporting cast. Seriously, they take this thing into realms of hilarity I was not expecting to see at all. Mikey Madison is every bit of the heart of this film, however. She is someone who is looking for her way out of the seedy line of work she's found herself in, but her motives and her willingness to go as far as she can are constantly called into question, even by herself. Her journey of trying to convince herself of the love she thinks she feels because it could be her proverbial light at the end of the tunnel is quite compelling, even when it's posted up alongside the silliness the film eventually leans into. But everything comes to a head in a moving final scene that encapsulates all of her vices and struggles into one retching outcry of emotion that absolutely floored me. It's simply a great time that fires on all cylinders all the way through and may have you tipping your strippers a little extra going forward.
The worm!
Good God, I can't remember the last time my expectations were subverted this heavily. Before it came out, I was not expecting Dune Part 2 to be as high on this list as it is, but here we are. I thought the first Dune was good, but nothing making me doing backflips in the theater. But this right here, this had me doing backflips, somersaults, and 360 corkscrews when I got done with this. A genuine, unabashed, incredible achievement in sci-fi storytelling. Denis Villeneuve has somehow found a way to amplify every aspect of the previous film to craft a monumental epic that blows the first film out of the water and into another solar system. The ensemble is terrific, with Timothée Chalamet finally selling me on not just being a terrific actor, but a bona fide movie star. Worlds feel fully realized this time around, and the use of color is far more creative and striking, especially with scenes set on the Harkonnen homeworld, or even the very first action scene on Arrakis. Which reminds me, the action sequences are staggering in how impressively constructed they are, succeeding at imposing the right amount of scale and grandeur into each. I usually hate chosen one narratives at this point, and yet the film finds a way to play against the expectations of such a trope, delving into the power and ego that comes from being proclaimed a messiah. Maybe I'm a bit head over heels because I saw it opening weekend in IMAX with a fantastic crowd, but let me tell you, I was leaning forward in my chair multiple times because I was just that locked in. Villeneuve absolutely deserves his flowers for this achievement, one that we all knew he was capable of for a very long time.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
Usually, this spot ends up getting taken up by the film that made me say "fuck yeah" movies the most while watching it. And I can think of no better champion of that feeling that I've had this year than Luca Guadagnino's latest masterpiece, Challengers. My God, what an absolute thrill this film is on both a narrative and technical level. Somehow, a love triangle movie with no sex scenes manages to be one of the most steamiest, intoxicating films I've seen all year. And that really comes down to the performances and the craft behind it. The leading trio is phenomenal, with each possessing different desires and goals that occasionally overlap and often push them apart. The three of them are constantly embedded with one another while also holding knives to each other's backs, yet none of their conflicts feel forced or for the sake of the plot. Most of them are just huge POSs, but their negatives all come from an understandable place. Their journeys together are told through a frenetic, constantly building visual style that takes sports cinematography to a whole new level, while never forgetting to remind us how erotic the sport of tennis can be. But it's also a testament to how Guadagnino can elevate simple story beats into moments that feel like life or death. The match between Art and Patrick that we cut to and from throughout the film isn't in itself a high-stakes game, and yet it's presented as the end of the world because of the emotional implications behind it. Truly some of the most fun and intentful camera work I've seen all year. And the music? God damn you, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, for creating this infectious score of electric club type beats that shouldn't work as well as they do. Oh, but they do. This ticks every box I'm looking for in what I consider to be a perfect movie. It's enticing, frenetic, and genuinely made me say, oh shit, out loud at one point. Not joking. While this was a year of bangers, this one bangs the hardest. And they didn't even have to put in any banging. Masterful work, sir. You have earned your spot as my favorite film of 2024. And that is my list. I'm interested to know what your favorite films of 2024 were down in the comments. If you're wondering why a certain film was missing from the list, they could be one of two places. Over on my blog, I have a list of all 100 plus films I've ranked, so be sure to check that out. But it's highly possible I didn't get to see a ton of great films this year. Going by my head now are honorable misses, films I wasn't able to see this year for one reason or another. It could be because of lack of time, lack of availability, or it just simply slipped my mind. If there's a film on this list I absolutely need to see, be sure to let me know. So now we're in 2025, and I first want to say a big thank you to everyone who subscribed to the channel this year, helping us cross the 1,000 subscriber milestone. Truly, I cannot explain what that means to me. Your continued support of this silly little channel has moved me in ways I can't explain. So again, thank you so much for watching. I do plan on doing a little 1,000 subscriber special at some point, but if you have an idea of what you want me to do with that or what you want to see me make in the new year, I'm down to hear it. Also, I'm participating in Dry January this year, so there won't be any cocktails until February, but I'm still gonna try to get the odd movie review out here and there. Additionally, I'll be moving soon, so the set is gonna be looking a bit different, and hopefully everything works out okay with that. And I think I've taken up enough of your time now, so once again, thank you so much for watching and tuning into the Martini Shot. I'll see you in the next one. Live deliciously, but please remember to drink responsibly.